Hello. So this is going to be my video reflection for Module 8, literacy across content areas. So first off, literacy. So we talk about literacy and how it's a skill that's needed in all content areas. Students need to know how to uh, read and write in all content areas. Just because the main reason I believe it helps them understand the content they're working on, what we're asking them to process. The way I would think about it is, we all the way that we learn or we want our students to learn is not just by having us being upfront and presenting what the content they're working on, but we want to give them the content and have them work through it on their own. And the only way we can do that is if they are able to process the information that's on the page that we're giving them, or if we're giving them a video on other say YouTube video or Brain Pop or something we find that we feel better gives them that information. They need to be able to sit there and listen to it and make write their notes, so they can go back through it later if we ask them to do a writing assignment on it, so we can see what they learned. I think that's important. Another thing that I saw in this was the exposure to academic language. It's important to be able to give our students that front loading of academic language. So when they're working on the lesson and they see a word they don't understand, they're not spending too much time trying to figure out what that is. So if we tell them, hey, these are the vocab words that are going to be important for this lesson, for this say the water cycle. You need to know what precipitation means, what evaporation means, runoff, um, water vapor, those sort of things. So that way, when they're going through that lesson and they see those words, they have a better understanding of what it that that word means and what that's trying to tell them. Um, we don't want our kid to waste all their brain power trying to figure out one word when there's a wider scope to the lesson. I think that's important. Um, it's also important to build their academic language just so they can have that. They can use that. And one way we do that in the classroom and now is we use accountability talk. So we ask students to stand up uh, and tell us what is their whatever it is we're working on. And they repeat it, they tell us, and then after that student shares, another student will stand up, we'll call on someone, asking if they agree or disagree, if they have any new thoughts, and then have them explain themselves. So I think that's important, just to have them have that time to um, use the knowledge they're gaining. And it's also important to have them use that language in their writing assignments. I think the more they use it, not use orally, but in the written form, they're better than be able to understand it and comprehend what it is that those words are saying. Um, so, and I think I liked about what I said about reading, writing, was that it helps us to better learn, deepens our knowledge of what we're learning. I know for me, it's one of the things that takes me a while to get through some of the modules for it sometimes, just because I have to read through things a few times and I have to write my notes on things so I can that helps me remember or helps me to have a sort of a framework for where I'm trying to work through things. So I really understand why it's important to have our students do that, because it's one of the things that helps me a lot when I'm working through the modules and the lessons that we're working on. And I think also being able to have students write on the topics that we're working on, the content area, where they are in science and history, it helps us to see um, where their understanding is of various things. Or I know that, for some students that have, if you have those students that really struggle in writing, it's going to give them practice in writing, and they're also going to give you the chance to um, see how you can support those students. See what you can do to make that assignment a way that they can practice practice their writing, practice their communication. I think that's important. Another thing too that I was thinking about writing is it helps us to see where like the classes as a whole I know we always like it's always good to group students into high, low, mediums. Um, that way, which students you need to work on with individually on different things, whether it be that specific content area lesson or if it's during your ELA or ELD time where you're pulling students and having them work on reading groups, so you can see that one-on-one connection with them and see what they're really struggling with and um, what strategies you can use to support them to help them when they're struggling. So I think it's important. Um, so another thing that I really liked in this module was it talked about listening skills. Um, I think that's one of the things that I've heard, some teachers uh, that they struggle with. I know, especially in the class that I'm in right now, so students are um, don't have those. I don't want to say the skills. I guess the listening skills are really lacking in that class. Um, so she really works on trying to have students giving her their full attention before she starts presenting a lesson, making sure that all students um, are quiet and respectful of others. Um, and I think that I talked about was it needs to be it's something that we need to teach our students, and that's something I hadn't thought of before. I think I don't remember ever being taught in the classroom and saying how to actually listen. Um, yeah, but that's what I think. That's one of the things that as a new teacher, you always have to be conscious of, especially when you have to, you're worried about like behavior management issues. Um, so you might always have a student or two that's they're going to be a struggle with that. But I think if you plan out at the beginning of the year and try to really get those your class as a whole to learn some procedures to be ready for when you start a lesson, that's going to be a great way to start teaching them how to listen. Um, so yeah, so that's one of the things that stood out to me. Um, Another thing too is I know it's one of the things I have to work on during my lessons is slowing down and stopping sometimes when students are uh, talkative or not paying attention, just stopping and giving them time to settle down. Um, and also giving them time to process. I know you talked about for every 8 to 10 minutes that you spend up there teaching and presenting a lesson, you need to give students around 1 minute or two to kind of process that information. One of the things I've seen done in this classroom is give them do a forehead stand, do a shoulder talk, so they can uh, talk to each other. Uh, make sure they're talking about the content, of course, that you're working on, but giving them a chance to work out what it is that you're presenting and giving them, because that's really the way that they're gonna learn and remember these things if they have time to stop and uh, not just process it in their minds, but then repeat it to someone else. Um, so I think that's one of the things too that I need to work on. Another thing too that I wrote down was that sometimes we're worried about time and we want to rush the things. At least I do. So this is one of the things that's going to help me kind of slow down my lesson, uh, and give students time to work on the lesson on their own. Let them struggle through things if we need to struggle through things. Um, and that's one of the things yes, that's another thing you learn just as you're in the classroom is learn what it is your students how much time they need and kind of notice if they're struggling through things, if they're not. Um, so if they're struggling through things, if they're struggling as a class, is it just certain students, and how do you, um, you know, I guess if it's a whole class, and you kind of how do you stop the lesson and kind of go back to things and kind of try to work through it work through it together with them. I think if we have individual students that are struggling, those sort of students you can kind of work with individually. Is gonna as you roam the room, so I think that's important. Then also the last part of it was the speaking portion, which is something that we also practice in the classroom where I'm in. Every time we have a lesson that we're working through, and we have students share, we kind of have we ask them to stand up. We ask them to share their thoughts on things, and um, after that, then we call on another student They have to either they share either if they agree, if they disagree, or they can add something new to what the previous student said. So I think that's something I really like about what the class that I'm in right now. So they have that procedure down where students know. Sometimes they just struggle getting them to share, but once they get going, I think it's a good thing to kind of have them all see what they're all thinking. Um, yeah, another thing I wrote down was it's not always. I think you're talking about that. It's not being a bad thing. Kind of take your time sometimes through a lesson, even if they're struggling. Um, I think struggling through a lesson kind of it lets them see what they need to work on. Um, lets them see maybe why they're not learning it. Lets you see as a teacher if maybe you're not presenting it properly. There's something you need to change about how you're um, giving them information. Um, yeah, I think we all learn through struggling through things. That's how we work things out. So um, that's one of the things I need to be conscious of is just slowing down and giving students time. I think that's the biggest thing. But yeah, I really enjoy this module. I think you know when you see how everything's tied together, I think it gives you a greater scope and a greater appreciation for how you can use all these things together to have students learn. Some even in math or especially I think in science and history when they have that time to share and um, experiment with the different strategies you can use to have them use the academic language or having them share their thoughts either orally or in print, individually and in groups. So uh, yeah, I really enjoyed this module. I think it was good. Um,
Yes.
yeah, so I think she showed me how I need to be aware of not just building a lesson for one content area, but um, looking at it as a whole. Uh, how to explain it? As a whole student, whole learning experience. How it is that we're wanting your students to share the information. You want them to do, uh, the written report. When sending written, do have them do maybe a video like this where they can share their thoughts or any other kind of computer based program. So yeah, thank you.